Recording in 3, 2. Well, folks, Max and Max's Models here, and I'm here with world-renowned aviation artist Mike Machat, and we're just going to talk about whatever pops into our heads. And I had a question I did want to start off with.
Yes, sir.
I'm still trying to recover from you asking me what was my favorite airplane, because that's how, like Robbie the Robot, I start shorting out trying to answer that one.
That's a tough one.
It is. If you break it by category, I could probably pick one, but it brought up an interesting question. And I figure we each take turns at it. What is your favorite kit model in each category, like World War I, World War II fighter, mid-war, now not necessarily the airplane, but the kit.
Mm-hmm.
So if we were to start off with World War I, which would pretty much be fighters or observation aircraft, what would be your favorite World War I kit that you can recall?
To be honest about it, that's not really my area, but the Revell SPAD, I guess that was 132nd. I don't know the exact scale, but that big SPAD kit that they had with the Rickenbacker Squadron was a beautiful kit and representative of Revell at the peak in the 50s. But I wasn't really, as I said, I'm a post-World War II guy, so that's the best answer I can give you.
No, that's fine. That's perfect. Mine was, I forget if it was a Revell, made a larger, like I want to say like 116 or 118 scale limited series. I had the blue triplane. And it was one of the first models I got to paint. All I had was black, but since the plane was molded in color, I just did the tires, the engine, and the guns, and it kind of looked okay. But also, the triplane didn't have any external rigging.
Right.
And just a side trivia, now, of course, everything I'm about to say is stuff I've read, so take that for what it's worth. Apparently, when Fokker designed the triplane, he didn't have the outboard struts on it. He didn't need them, but because it was an all-new design, people tend to realize that there's almost no external rigging on it. But apparently, given the conservative nature of the German military, he was told by his engineers that you really need to put some struts on the wings, or just as a matter of principle, it'll scare them off. So he did. So it was kind of an overbuilt airplane. Well, getting into the post-World War II stuff, that's great, because that's actually one of my favorite areas, the early jets.
Mm-hmm.
And I think one reason I love that era so much is, from the 30s to the 60s, aircraft were pretty single mission. And there were so many cool designs that were coming out, even ones that weren't accepted. Mm-hmm. And I think, even though I know it was underpowered, I think I've kind of always had a soft spot for the Phantom 1 and the Banshee. Just because, I don't know, that sort of, the little canopy sticking up on the long, skinny fuselage, it was something about it I just thought was, and I have a Banshee hanging up in the shed. But that Phantom 1, I just always thought kind of had this, I'm not really sure what the word is. It was this beautiful mix of World War I technology and the incoming jet technology.
Yeah, if you want, we can chat a little about that. That era is represented by one of my all-time favorite phrases. I first saw this in a National Geographic in like 1951 or something. It's called the blowtorch era. It's the era before the Supersonic Century series and the Navy Phantom and all that sort of stuff. So the blowtorch era refers to what the early jets looked like when they lit off. If you see color footage of the Bell XP-59 at Edwards with the old canvas door and the hangar 1 up there at North Base, when they light that engine, a flame comes out. It looks like a blowtorch. That's where that name came from. And the point about that time period is, as you say, they were taking airframes that were just right at the end of World War II and plugging a jet engine into that. I've told you that my uncle worked at Republic he was in human factors, designed escape systems, things like that. And he always told me the story. I remember this from the time I was a little kid. He always told me the story of the F-84 Thunderjet, which was, as he described it, an airplane that they were writing the book about designing a jet airplane as they were designing the jet airplane. And the point I want to make is that when the P-84, XP-84 first flew at Edwards in 1947, I believe, 46, they were having a lot of problems getting it flight ready. And one of the engineers at Edwards called back to Farmingdale, and he said, "Let me tell you about this engine. It catches fire, it blows up, it burns a lot of gas, it's very unpredictable, unreliable. I guarantee you that this thing will never power an airliner." And as Dr. Phil says, how'd that work out? but it goes to the point of how hard they worked and how hard they tried to get the engine. And again, we're talking 4,000 or 5,000 pounds of thrust. You know, 6,000 pounds of thrust was that was the best you could get. And then you get into the pre-century, you know, the early 50s. You got the Pratt J57 and up to the J75, General Electric J79. Now you're talking 8, 10, 12, 14,000 pounds of thrust. Put two of those together, you got the F4 Phantom. Now you got a Mach 2 airplane. So it was just a meteoric rise in technology and progress. But it all started with those early jets, like you say, the early Phantom, P-80 from Lockheed on the Air Force side, XP-86 from North American, and you know, it was a pioneering era, and a lot of those airplanes get short shrift for, you know, being underpowered and not really good performing. But in those days, those were the stealth fighters of their era. That was the hottest, coolest, neatest thing you could possibly have. And it's only in retrospect that we look back on that and say those old underpowered planes, but they were, in their own right, they were fabulous, which links to the point about the models. You and I were discussing this on the phone a while back, is the fact that we look at these model kits as, you know, the old airplanes. And when those kits came out, the companies were literally fighting to be the first ones to release the new F-89 Scorpion or the new F-94 Starfire. And so there was this race to the finish to get these kits out to the hobby shops and to the kids. We were the consumers at 10, 12, 14 years old. And we couldn't get our hands on these things fast enough. But it all tied in together. And I always use this word. It's, you know, it was almost a celebration of how fantastic the aerospace industry was in that time period.
Yeah. When I was, I guess this would have been the late 60s, I'd gotten into modeling jets. And I can remember looking at a model of the F-102. Now, and people tend to forget that these delta wing jets were being designed when cars had tail fins. It's just, you could park a lot of the Century Series aircraft on the set of Star Wars and they would fit right in. But we tend to forget how, I don't want to use the word primitive, but basic the aero was on. But I was looking at it, and it was one of them that had box art, and it might have been the Revell kit. And I remember looking at and it was the early F-102 that had the portly fuselage before they had Whitcomb, was it Richard Travis Whitcomb had come up with the area ruled thing. And I looked at it, I went, that's a fat looking jet, even with the delta wing and everything. It's just a fat looking jet. I don't want that. I'm going to get the F-104. And this is how great model selection decisions were made. I think now, I don't know that as a kid I ever saw a kit of the Phantom, but I did see a kit of the Banshee. And I was looking at that, and I was looking at the Grumman Panther. And I remember this Banshee, even though, you know, the Panther could greatly outperform it because it was a later design, but I was looking at the Banshee just going, well, it just looks more elegant because it's got, you know, the long wings and the longer fuselage. And oh, this Panther's so stubby and fat. It can't be the better. And the wings don't even fold all the way over. They just go up like four. And then I saw the movie The Bridges of Toko Ri. And of course, oh no, I've got to have the Panther. I've got to have the Panther. Yeah. And it makes me wonder how many of our decisions to buy the models were influenced by the movies and everything. And I think that goes on even today.
Yeah, movies and television too. In the early days of TV, and of course, you know, there's no better example of the impact of a TV show. There were two actually, from the mid '50s or mid to late '50s. Steve Canyon, about the F-102. Those episodes are now out on DVD, and guys our age are devouring these things. But you know, and this is an interesting point. As a kid, you look at the TV show, and Steve is rated in every airplane that the Air Force has. He's flying a C-130 one week and a B-52, and then he's in an F-102, and you know, just like they do in the real Air Force. But I don't think there was any for however many seasons that show ran. I don't think he was ever in an airplane that didn't have an emergency of some sort. You know, so we're taking off everything. Oh my God, the wing's falling off. Steve, you know, and it was captivating for a kid's audience. You look at it now, and especially if you've been in our business and you're familiar with some of this stuff, you go, oh yeah, that was the test they did at Edwards with the F-100 Zell, where and the booster didn't fall off. The guy had to eject. I remember that. They took real footage of actual events and things that were happening at Edwards and all throughout the Air Force, the SAC bases, B-52 shots, you name it. And they interwove the storyline with Steve and the, the good guys, the bad guys, and however that worked. They interlaced that with the footage, the existing footage, actual Air Force footage. And to look at them today, you kind of go, oh yeah, that was the test they did. I remember, and you see how they crafted it, but it impacted our generation. And the other show I was going to mention for the helicopter guys was Whirlybirds.
Whirlybirds.
And I'm sure anybody watching is probably falling over and, oh my God, Chuck Martin and PT. But I know professional helicopter pilots today of our generation who some are just retiring, whatever, but they attribute their career to that TV show. They literally said every Tuesday night at 7:30, whatever it was, they were watching that show, and they were going to fly, not just they were going to fly a Bell 47, and that's what they were going to do. And by gosh, that's what they did. They dedicated their lives to that, inspired by a TV show.
It's funny you should mention that. When I was a kid, there was a short-lived summer fill-in summer fill-in show called Chopper One, and it had Dirk Benedict, who later played Starbuck in the original Battlestar, and it probably went 12, 15 episodes. Well, they made a Chopper One. Somebody who had a Keo, a Jet Ranger kit, just slapped their picture on it in the decals and sold it as Chopper One. I remember wanting to buy it, but it was like Chopper One or something, and I may have actually bought it because I seem to remember having it at the house, and that had to give them a kick in the sales for a little while for just basically reprinting the box and some decal sheets. But the influence that even, by the way, I went to look for even on ScaleMates, I went to look for that helicopter and could not find that kit anywhere. It was a short run kit, and but because it was never very popular, it'd be rare, but not something a collector would want. And but the post-war jets, though, I remember a lot of the television shows, like the cartoon Johnny Quest. Now, Johnny Quest went back and forth between having these incredibly futuristic-looking aircraft and then these really silly-looking, like they would have the float plane, the amphibian, or the helicopter that looked like something. It was genuinely cartoon. Like, what's the one with Baloo, where he's flying where the bear is, the characters from Jungle Book are flying the float plane service. Oh gosh, it escapes. Anyway, it was just really bad design. The helicopter was like a bubble with a curved tail. I was like, oh God. But then you go to Johnny Quest, so they've got that jet at the beginning, and some of the aircraft they fly in that are super cool. They kind of, Hanna-Barbera really ran hot and cold on that. But now I see that was a Dragonfly was what they called his jet. Now I see a couple of companies are putting out the Dragonfly kit, and they're flying, pardon the pun, flying off the shelves.
It imitates art. Yeah.
Oh yeah, but the one episode they had something that they sent jet Air Force interceptors, and it looked like an F-102 was what it was based on. And to me, the F-102 and the F-106 were always the Johnny Quest jets. But that was the thing. I was getting back to buying kits. I looked at the early F-102 kit. That thing looks fat, it doesn't. And it's the old thing, the British say, if it looks right, it flies right. But then I also the F-106, and I was like, oh, I will buy any F-106 on the shelf.
I'm wondering if you were looking at and I'm thinking it was Comet or Hawk had the XF-92 with the barrel fuselage. I
have that one. No, this was actually somebody made, and it might have been the big Revell one. I don't think it was the big Revell 132nd kit. That would have been beyond that's about $1,000 kit these days, by the way. If you have
all the ground equipment?
Yeah, all the ground equipment.
Yeah, and by the way, I said in my video, I said 132nd, and I had a number of gentle reminders that it was 148.
Oh, 148, so, correct.
For all you viewers out there, that Revell 102 is 148 scale.
I saw that. I thought, well, okay, I won't.
I just remember, and here, this is an interesting point. Being a kid, and think of being, how big were we? How tall were we at 10 or 12 years old? And we're holding this massive, giant box, and then. So here we are today, and we go to a kit collector show, and it's like, wait a minute, this was it? I remember, well, yeah, it shrank. No, we got bigger. And so for some reason I had in my mind that the first time I saw that, the first time I took the lid off that 102 with the ground equipment, it was acres of plastic. I'm not going to finish this until I'm 20, And so I just remembered it as being this massive, giant piece of silver plastic. I remember looking into the box and seeing the Delta wing, but it's 148, as I was informed several times. So Yeah.
Well, getting back to post-war jets, did you built airliner kit models too, right? Or
Airliners, yeah.
yeah. What was your favorite jet airliner to build?
Revell 990. And it's got a twist to it.
Mm-hmm.
It came out as a Swiss Air airplane. I got to fly in one when I was in the Air Force. I had to go to the West Coast, and they send me travel pay, and you get to pick however you want to do it. I found an American Airlines flight in the last 6 months of 990 service that went JFK, Detroit, Chicago, San Francisco. I was connecting. I had to go to Travis Air Force Base to go to Japan in the Air Force. And I thought, 3 takeoffs and landings. I'm in heaven. And the reservation gal, you called reservations back in those days.
Uh-huh.
Sir, we have a nonstop that leaves, it's a 707. I said, if I have to explain this to you, you're not going to understand. I had to get up at like 4 in the morning and but it was like, I called that airplane a B-58 with 100 seats in it. It was like a rocket ship. I loved it. So the point is, when Revell had that kit, stunning, flush rivet detail, what I call a shrink-o-matic. It looked like a real airplane just shrunk down. But there's a twist. It came out in Swiss Air markings, and for 10 cents you could buy SAS decals. It was, interline. If you bought the Revell American Astrojet, those decals fit the 990.
Oh.
I painted it silver, and I put the Astrojet 707 decals on, and it was, as we say here in California, to die for. But what's really funny, you have Craig Cadera's book. Craig and I have known each other he's the younger brother I never had. I love him. And we get together and we're talking about the 990. He says, you know what? The American Airlines Astrojet. And I went, oh, we both fell down laughing, but and any of the serious guys, there were a number of people who did that same bit. We didn't know each other at the time, but it was like, how cool is that? You can make the 990 Astrojet, because that's what you saw flying over our house every day. So that would be my answer to the favorite airliner kit. The close second would be the Caravel.
Yeah, I didn't build a lot of airliner jets, but the ones I did build, I could never just make them look good, because airliners are very shiny. Military planes have that wear and tear. You can hide mistakes with a little battle damage or whatever, or camouflage. Weathering. But an airliner is supposed to, and with these 10 thumbs, I've never been real good at that sort of stuff. But I was always, to me, it's a 727. Which is the one I have on the shelf, and I got some aftermarket Eastern decals, and I had to put a lot of work into that, and it came out kind of mediocre. From with my eyes standing out front of the shelf, it looks fine, but when you take photos where it blows it, ugh. And then
we call them 5-footers,
Yeah, 5 exactly.
Awesome.
And then Atlantis just repopped the 727 in Eastern marking, so I'm going to have to run off and buy about 4 of those so I can get one right. But also I rode around in 727s all the time. So I always had a soft spot for Eastern Republic, because they were my ride back and forth in the military. And I think an Eastern jet may have been the first airliner ride ever. No, it was TWA. It was TWA when I went in the Army. But when you were like, you did some box art, right? Did you do some box art?
I did a series of airliners and 2 military airplanes for Lodella.
That's right.
And you were asking in one of your posts about how does an artist get to do box art, and you want to talk about that?
Sure, please.
Yeah. It's a great question. I thought about it. I did a little homework, and the answer, the big picture answer I would give you is it was regional. If you think about the East Coast companies, Aurora, Renwall, and then the Midwest companies, Lindbergh, Monogram in Chicago, and that whole thing. And then the Midwest companies, and then the West Coast companies, Revell. The artists who lived near those companies, who were connected somehow to the aerospace industry, were the ones who got those initial golden age contracts to do the box art. So you had Jack Lenwood at Northrop in California. You had George Okamoto at Douglas. You had John Amendola in a later generation, John Amendola up at Boeing. On the East Coast, you had Joe Catula, who did all the Revell, Aurora covers. And Joe did the ads for Piper in Lockhaven. He was in the Pennsylvania area. He did model airplane news covers and just, very prolific. Mark Kunstler on Long Island. I mean, a lot of the New York guys did that. So it was a regionality. Ray Gadke from Chicago did Lindbergh. And so that was the connection. A generation later, I was in LA. I was working at McDonnell Douglas, and I met I'll call it the U.S. rep for Lodella, Ron Ferreira, delightful, darling guy. Just so enjoyed working with him, full of enthusiasm. I have this new idea. We got to do this. And it was a joy. It was an absolute joy. But I met him at, are you ready? A model show, a kit collector's. I walk in. It was like, Christmas morning. It was just like, oh my God, 1975. It was the first year of what they call the Keller, Bob Keller, the late Bob Keller, established this kit collector expo and sale. It went continuously. They never missed a show. It ran either 2 or 3 times a year, continuously from 1975. And the first one they canceled was this spring because of the pandemic. But that show was the kind of the melting pot, or the crucible that forged lifelong friendships. And Ron had a table there, and I said, "Oh, I'm an artist. You're an artist. Oh, we have to do covers." And we went and had dinner and just formed an immediate friendship. And I did, I think it was 10 or 12 covers. I did a lot of decal work. I did the stencils for the silkscreen decals, a lot of side panels, some direction sheet art. So it was really a kind of a dream come true to get my feet wet in that sort of thing. And it was a great experience learning how to adapt a painting to the box top. In other words, to that shape, that horizontal shape. The art had to be designed to work in that frame of reference. I learned in art school early on, art directors they're the boss and you do whatever they say. And so Ron it was a collaboration. That was the point I was trying to make, is that he'd come up with an idea and it had to work within this frame. And well, what if we put the airplane and bank it a little bit this way and we add contrails and put the mountains over here? And it was just a wonderful collaboration of ideas to come up with these covers. An interesting thing about cover design, and this was told to me by Jack Lenwood, who, as I said in my post, became a dear friend over the years. He talked about how in many cases the designs were not made for the top of the box. Think about this. They were made for the end of the box.
Because that's often what was...
Yeah. What do you see on the shelf in the hobby shop?
Right. They stack them so...
Box end. And in many cases, if you look at a lot of those early Revell boxes, the illustration on the end of the box is not the same as the one on the top of the box.
I was going to ask about that.
Did you ever notice that? Because
I did, actually.
Yeah, they were.
Even as a kid, I was like, wait a minute, they had to do 2 artworks for this?
You bet. They were because the end of the box is what sold it when you saw it on a shelf. Okay.
And it also had to get through that folded cellophane in a lot of cases, because you'd had to be able to make it out through where the hospital corners were at.
Yeah, unlike a lot of the cello wraps you see at today's model shows, where the scene isn't in the center. I won't go there, but yeah, that was another aspect of it. And you raise an interesting point there, Max, because look at how many different ways of packaging those models. You had the cello wrapped, you had the boxes with the cello window in it, the Lindbergh had the series you could look in and see plastic. And then you had good old Revell, God bless him, with an open box and 10,000 parts. And what happened?
Kids start...
Boom, and the little tail cone would flip out, or the pitot tube, whatever.
I need an extra decal sheet.
You take it home, and you know where I'm headed with this. You take it home and you get it out.
Where's my part 34?
Oh, I'm missing the inboard left-hand number 2 engine cowl flap. So what do? You write to department, remember Department X? 10 cents.
My name is Max. I live in
Florida. And your hobby shop owner's head, and you send it to Revell, and they send you the missing part. Well, this worked in the beginning, but by the time the baby boomers had expanded, and they were making 100,000 models per pressing, times how many in the catalog. Do the math. That's a ton of kits out there. And they were drowning in Department X requests. So in the late 1950s, they spent $50,000 on a feasibility study, and they went out. And I knew this from one of the art directors at Revell in the 50s that I knew through Society of Illustrators of LA. And he told me about this study that they did, where they went out with this questionnaire to hobby shops, Rexall Drugs, Woolworths, department stores, stationery stores, any place that sold model kits, to ask the store owners what they thought was the best solution to solve this problem of missing parts. Okay. And like it just ran the gamut, cello wrap and this, and tape the box shut, do whatever you want to do. And you know what they came up with?
But
And all the modelers out there who are watching, they're going to be sitting there nodding their head going, yeah. In the early 60s, they had an open box and the parts were inside a poly bag, inside the open box. That was their solution.
that explains why that started.
There you go. So that was their answer to the best of all worlds. Is you could still open the box, look in, see all the parts. It was sealed, so you knew everything was going to be in there. They purposely put the decal and direction sheet on the bottom, underneath all the parts, and that solved the problem. But there's a twist. But wait, there's more. The hobby shop owners that put the Scotch tape on those sides of the original pre-S and S kit Revell boxes to keep them shut so the grubby little 12-year-old hands wouldn't spill parts out on the floor. All these years later, you go to a kit collector show or you're on eBay and you want to make sure that the box top and bottom match, guess what? Scotch tape stains, because the tape itself, I'm sure, is peeled off after decades. And there's your living, that's your pedigree. There's your living proof that the box has not, at least the box matches, and hasn't been messed with or molested or, you know.
At least you know you got the right bottom. Well, that gets us to the next thing I want to talk to you about. We discussed briefly, and that's the counterfeiting of vintage kits. Which, you know where I'm going with this, but I'll let you pick up the ball and run with it.
Well, it's you know, it's a little sensitive in the sense that I'm sure we've all had what we call the brown truck surprise. That's the way I talk about it. UPS truck. You find the thing on eBay and you look at the photos for a week and you study everything and everything looks cool. And you know what? Funny you should bring this up because I just went through it. I guilty as charged in the sense of receiving something that I thought this was a historic kit and I didn't know. And then I got it and I had the brown truck surprise. You wait for a week, you hear the UPS truck comes around the corner and you hear the door open and the doorbell rings and here's your exalted.
Oh.
So I bid for, names will not be mentioned, but I bid for a KC-135, a Revell KC-135A. You know, had the box art refueling a B-52 and everything, with fan engines in the kit, with turbofan engines in the kit. And I thought, I've never seen this. This has to be one of a kind. He had the parts laid out. He had the seller had photos. What he didn't show was the direction sheet. And that was the proof. And that's the chance that I took. And full disclosure, I paid about $35-40 for it. It wasn't the end of the world. But the direction sheet would have proven whether Revell ever issued the 135 with fan jet engines. Hint, it didn't. It never happened. What I got when I opened that box, which by the way had the matching tape, so that was that added. But I opened the box and found a mishmash of KC-135 parts with the American Astrojet engine. And when you finally looked at it, and you don't see this on eBay, you just can't see it on the pixels on a computer screen, the sheen of the plastic was ever so slightly different. And I went back to the listing and I looked at it and I went, because only having seen it, then I went back and said, you know what? Yeah, the original silver plastic, it was like sculpture in the 50s. You know, it had this silver finish and it was stunning. The later early 60s had more of a softer silver gray look to it and a less shine. And sure enough, man, I got those pieces out on the desk and looked at them and just went, okay, you know, and I had friends waiting like, what's the direction sheet look like? And it was the original KC-135. So Revell never issued that. But it goes to the heart of the point about, look, I'm not saying the seller did this maliciously.
Yeah, the seller may not have known.
Yeah, may not have known it came from a collection.
In fact, if the seller knew, he probably wouldn't have put pictures out there because.
It's all good. He wasn't. To be fair, he was not a he was selling it was an estate sale or something. He was moving a product for a family or something. So it's all fine. As I said, it was $30. But it was a good lesson about as careful as you can be by just not seeing that direction sheet on the posting on the eBay listing. That was the whole ball game. So again, we don't know how it happened, and again, I'm not pointing fingers, but there have been kits at the kit collector shows where people will mix and match and take the decals from one kit and mix it with the direction sheet and put parts in together and it's a buyer beware. You got to know your stuff. And I'm sure if anybody's watching this, they're into this hobby far enough to know pretty much how to stay in good shape on a kid. It does happen.
I've had my share of little similar type things, not too bad, nothing serious. But some of them you can't do that with because they were never reproduced. Like the little Aurora Cherokee they only made for a couple of years and that was it. There simply weren't, but a lot of kits keep getting repopped. And when I got my Hobby Lifelike CH-1 helicopter, the Cessna H-1 helicopter, which Adams had come out with and called the missile transporter, put those gigantic Hawk missiles on the tail boom.
Yes.
Like that would ever fly, but that's another story. Although I have to admit, I looked at it and the box art, that was so Johnny Quest, I had to have one, even though I knew it was completely ludicrous. But when I took the box out, now the Hobby Lifelike were reshoots out of the old Adams molds. They were made, 15, 20 years later. And I inventoried, everything was there, original decal sheet, I was actually able to use it. They look a little rough on the model, but I like the fact that they are original. But anyway, so when I turn over the rotor blade, stamped on the bottom is Adams 1958. So they never changed the mold. And I was like, an unscrupulous person could get a nice Adams box for $30 on eBay, just a box, put all this in there, and except maybe for the instruction sheet, they'd have to work their way around that. But I was like, other than that, if you could get an Adams box with a instruction sheet, and no one would ever be the wiser because they use the exact same green plastic and it's the exact same molds. And I mean, since this was Hobby Lifelike, it was $30. But I was like, some of these people get $200-300 for that model. And I'm like, an unscrupulous person could easily pull this and no one would be the wiser. So
have you ever seen gift sets? You remember where they put 3 or 4 different models and in a big box and you'd get it, it was, $4.95 and you get it as a Christmas present kind of thing. But there was quite a run of mixing and matching where somebody would find a gift set, supersonic fighters, and they'd have the F-11F and the F-8U Crusader, but it was missing the F-104. So what do? You go to a model swap meet, hey, a 104, and you put that in the gift set to complete it, and it's not bad. But
that's not quite it because they simply grabbed them off the production line. If it came off the same production line, although it's not original to that set, it is probably the identical.
But it's the direction sheet. It's always the direction sheet because they would reformat the direction sheets with a re-release. And so the original might have like a trifold horizontal, and the other one was vertically. There are little giveaways that you have to be careful of. But there's a wonderful parallel. I'm a big Corvette nut, and I restored a couple of the 60s Corvettes in my time. And there's a famous saying in terms of collectability and what we're talking about right now, of the 427 big block L88s, of the 222 that were produced, there are only 1,600 left, which means they guys have built those cars into replicas or whatever. And so you get a lot of that in the model business. And then, as I said, the gift sets are kind of the poster kids for how things can be mixed and matched.
Have you built any models of the Corvette?
Oh yeah. Why? Yes, I have, Max.
Well, just shifting gears to the cars for a second. Do you have a preferred manufacturer for model cars, AMT or MPC or?
I was a big AMT guy. I used to. I would what I call lightly customize. I would lightly customize my car model. So I'd take a '63 Thunderbird and just ever so slightly tweak a few of the things. But I love the AMT stuff. I'll tell you, the Revell had some stunning. Back in that era, Revell had the XKE Jag. I built a Mickey Thompson Challenger 1 Bonneville Racer, which was a fabulous kit. It's really beautiful. Take all the clarity and fidelity and detail of any Revell airplane and apply that to the automobile. That's what you had. Those were great kits.
I actually had some trouble with the Revell 132nd Fighter series with the fits on certain parts, like the Spitfire. The aileron had a huge gap. On the Spitfire and the Messerschmitt, the canopies had a huge gap. Although overall the engines and everything, I liked a lot of the detail that was in them. Because when I was a kid, the 132nd scale Revell fighters that Jack Glenwood, I think he did all or most of the box art for. Certainly, that Spitfire and the 109 or 2, but the Spitfire is my undisputed favorite.
Yeah, those were his favorite covers I asked him that.
Yeah.
Just like we're talking about now. I said, what are the most favorite covers you ever did? without hesitation said the 132nd Fighters because they were big enough to really get into detail and get.
I watched your videos on how he broke so many of the rules and everything and doing that, and that's the kind of thing that takes an artist to appreciate. But when you started talking about it, showed the jagged line with the thunderbolt with the guy, I was like, yeah. But I built my share of cars, but not that many, and I never really had a favorite company. And since I was catching a lot of comments from viewers about, you don't talk enough about cars, or or there would be little arguments between NPC versus AMT, I went and got a 65 GTO and a 67 GTO from AMT and NPC, and I'm going to do a comparison build. And sure enough, I get a comment from Brad Leisure, who did the artwork for the 65.
Oh,
he watches the channel. I was like, oh my gosh! So I've been in contact with him. Maybe at some point he and I'll do something like what we're doing. But I was, it's the car world's different. But apparently, it's just as tough for illustrators there. And I guess that brings me back to the life of the illustrator. And I know it's different for everybody, because I know you had if you'll pardon the phrase, a real job at Douglas for a long time. I mean, where you actually had a place that you went to work. But I understand a lot of artists, it's gig work, it's piecework. And that's got to be kind of a tough way to make a living.
I wore a couple of different hats. I mean, Douglas was, I was in-house for almost 8 years, and then worked as freelance outside contractor for another 4 or 5. And that was a fabulous, I mean, as I said, that was the launching pad. That was a fabulous experience. But I'll try and put it gently, the company was having some tough times, and eventually, things got to the point where Boeing took them over in 1997. But I left the company in 1984 to start my own business. And I had, and again, I should mention, to put it in perspective, this was the heyday of aviation art. The print market was just starting. All the World War II anniversaries were happening. And so it was a really amazing time. I literally, got off the top rung of one ladder and got on the bottom rung of another ladder. And it was quite a ride. It was an amazing time. But for all the aviation artists that I work, and let me put this in perspective. In the United States, the number of people who were making 100% of their income doing nothing but illustrating aircraft for all these different needs, movie posters, magazine covers, books, you name it, models. I want to say about maybe a dozen, in terms of, and we all knew each other. We were the best of friends and competed for jobs, and it was an amazing brotherhood. The American Society of Aviation Artists, of which I was the first president, was 25 charter members. Now think of the U.S. population and how many people are in the art business. 25 guys, actually, and one gal, were charter members of the ASAA. But point being that I made a living for, I want to say, the better part of 20 years doing nothing but illustrating aircraft. That's what I did. And so it was a small club, but the guys, we all kind of, as in any competitive sport or any competitive enterprise, we all pushed each other and made each other better. And most of us are still in touch today. As I said, it was a family. We were brothers, and it was very special.
I have one, I think I might have mentioned to you, I have one piece of art that I actually commissioned of the airplane I fly, the Embraer 190. Oh, yeah. And that was by Troy White, who's an expat down in Paraguay. And if I understand what Troy said correctly, if I'm interpreting his meaning correctly, he basically moved to Paraguay so he could work full time as an artist and live off of what he was making, because you couldn't feed yourself in the U.S. It's a much cheaper place to live. But
save that for another video. But yeah.
Yeah. But what I was wondering was did you ever do, like, just somebody says, hey, just paint this painting for me of my airplane, or did you ever get into that kind of?
Oh, quite a bit. Yeah. In my book, I wrote a book about my career, and I have a whole chapter devoted to just that. I call it a moment in time. What it usually involved was a pilot who commissioned me to paint something from a moment from his life, whether it was military, commercial. I even had a home builder, a EAA home builder, who built a glass air, and had me do a painting of him taking off from Rosamond, California, flying the airplane to Oshkosh after working on it for 19 years.
Wow.
And it was, he flew me in the airplane, and it was a fabulous project. But it's a shot of him taking off from the Rosamond Airport, which is like an airport that you live at, you have the houses right next to the runway. And his wife is down there waving at him. He's got the dog and it was just this beautiful family portrait of him leaving in the airplane to go to Oshkosh for the first time, about 60 years ago. And he wanted that moment captured forever. And so the commissions for specific airplane. I had a Piper Aerostar that a pressurized Aerostar that the pilot flew to 31,000 feet, and he wanted a picture of the airplane over a thunderstorm at that altitude with a dark blue sky and all this stuff. And those projects are magic. I'm honored to have the opportunity to bring something to the people who own these airplanes. The families were usually, I have what we call a reveal at the studio here, the easel behind me, and I have the painting covered and the family standing around. I take it off, and his wife broke into tears. You know, it was just a moving. I was so touched. You know, that the art affected them that way, and this is something that they would have for the rest of their lives and would hang. I'm sure it's in the living room, over their couch, whatever. But it's an honor and a responsibility, which I took very seriously, and I've done. I would say dozens, not many dozens of private commissions of just that sort of thing, and a lot of military stuff too.
I was, you'd mentioned earlier, I didn't realize you'd done decals also. Yep. And that prompted a thought, which is, let's just say that Max's models decide, hey, you know what, I'm going to go into the business of making decals.
Mm-hmm.
When I get the decal sheet, I'm like, what kind of machine even makes these? Because it's clearly not a printer. I made my own on my laser for a specific decal for a model, but what does it take to make decals? Tell me about that process or what you know of it.
I'm going to just preface my answer with the fact that I'm going to show my generation, because the decals that I worked on were silk screen.
Okay.
And I promise not. You guys out there watching this, don't laugh too hard. They were silk screen. And I would make the patterns by taking amberlith film, which was a very just super thin, micron thin film, wrapping it around the model, cutting the pattern, and then peeling it off. In other words, to think of an airliner with the cheat stripe or the window stripe, wrapping around the nose of the airliner. It had this weird shape. So I would literally do that with this orange film, peel it off, and then that pattern became the decal.
Okay.
That's how I got the shape.
So I get it. So it was a physical thing. It wasn't a math calculation.
No. I wrapped the model in that film, and that was the template, as it were, for the decal, so that when you slid that thing off, and of course you would do it perfectly, it would never wrap around your finger or get stuck. That would never happen.
I never destroyed one.
No, but you would slide it onto that airliner, and the decal would wrap around the nose, radome, or wherever it was, and that's how we got it to fit. Each color was separate. Each color was screened separately. So if you think of like an Eastern cheat stripe with red pinstripes above and the lettering and everything, the red was one overlay, one pass of the silk screen, and the blue was another. It was Eastern Golden Falcon or a third, American flag, whatever it was. Those colors were put on separately, and then they were one on top of the other, and they'd be out on a drying rack. Then they'd put the sealant, the coating that would actually become the transfer medium, and there was your decal sheet. Today it's done digitally. It's a whole nother, it's like comparing SpaceX with the Mercury program.
Sure. I just saw your video on the Eastern decals. We were talking about the golden and the red and why they did all that. Make perfect sense. Yeah. And I was like, it's, and I imagine they try to reuse as many as they can also, or like the molds by the way, brings up another point real quick. One thing I wanted to ask you about the P3 and the Electra. You'd mentioned Bell had destroyed the mold for the Electra to make the P3, but now, are you saying that they modified the Electra mold where they ground out where it couldn't be used again, or they actually destroyed it and started from scratch?
It's a good question, and I probably overstated the destroying part, but what I meant is they destroyed the ability for them to make another airliner. What they did is they took the fuselage of the L-188 commercial airliner. They added the Mad Boom on the tail. It has a different windshield. Took the windows out. Has two big observation blisters. It's a different shape of the nose, which to their credit they got accurate. It had some slight differences on the engines. There were some subtleties about it that just like going from the airliner to the real P3 Orion. In answer to your question, it was a one-time shot. When they changed those molds, that was it. There would be no more airliners.
Not unless they got a whole new mold, and that wouldn't be the same airplane.
A point I failed to make in that video was that the rate of production. When you look at the models that are made today, the Mach 2 series. There's some beauty, Anagram, there's some wonderful models, but they're very limited in run. They'll make 1,000, they'll make 500, they'll make two, I mean, you know what I'm saying? It's a very well, special limited edition kind of things. One pressing of a Revell kit at the heyday was 100,000 models, 100,000. And that would last about a year. And then they'd redo it. And that gave them an opportunity to add missiles or, change the box art or reissue it and refresh it. And as you say, repop. And that's where those happened, is they would literally run out of a production run of 100 or several 100,000, and they'd repress the kit. And this goes to another aspect of collecting. The plastic, the styrene plastic, I believe was either clear or gray. It was a neutral color, and the color for the model was added with color pellets. So they were introduced into the mix of liquid plastic that would be shot through the mold. Those pellets changed all the time. Yeah. So to a connoisseur collector, you say, what color olive drab was the Revell Prius B-25 Mitchell bomber? And you say, which week? Because there were olive drabs that were more brown, more green, more yellow, subtle. And you would actually, you could measure how the production run went through history. How many different battleship grays were there on the Revell, on any of the ship models? Silver had different characteristics to it. So a pressing became just much like limited edition art. It was the pressings were very specific, and the color would shift very slightly. So here's the point I'm trying to make. The first pressing of a model was the best because the molds were clean, they were new, detail was just impeccable. And as they would, like a vinyl record, every time they'd use it, it would get a little softer, a little softer. And by the time you got to the 1960s reissues or the 50th anniversary reissues from Revell of Germany, which were stunning that they did that, but it was a different model than what you bought in 1955. Yep.
Even the copper beryllium molds wear, and I know the steel molds wear even faster. I've been talking to some of the guys who are involved with the mold process. And one of them who I've been working with, who worked at Aurora for 10 years, Andy Anches, was telling me that if you had a good mold press operator, he could probably get 60 pressings an hour because, they have several things they have to do in the process. And that those things were going out the door, and Aurora was getting about 43 cents a piece for a model that retailed for $1. And I did the math on that, and you think about how many machines, how many models, how much styrene you got to get out the door to keep the doors open. And you're kind of like, and 100,000 is a lot of pressings, but when you do the math, it isn't that much actual money in the company coffers when everything's paid. You realize these places had to be like grocery stores on these thin margins they must have operated on, which explains why in the late 70s through the early 2000s, so many companies that have been around forever just quietly started going away. In Japan and all these other places, they just quietly started going away. And when I got Craig's book, I kid you not, I was actually looking at these, what I thought were overpriced Aurora classic kits. And you still there?
Yeah, the picture froze.
Yeah, your picture froze too. All right. Well, they can listen to our buttery smooth voices. But I was, and then I looked at Craig's book and realized maybe these people are not asking too much. And
you're welcome.
All right, I got the recorder going again. No, I was going to point out, I got Craig's book does a great job of pointing out that most of the manufacturers are in 3 geographic locations.
Yeah.
And I'd always wondered why Japan had gotten so big into models, plastic models so early.
You mean this? Yeah, is this the book you're talking about?
That's it. We literally have bookends.
Yeah. It's, page 12. It's got a map of the U.S. and all the where all the companies were located.
Yep.
There you go.
I get back into. That's it. Yeah. I have the artificial backdrop because I'm in my bedroom and no one wants to see that. But the thing about Craig's, the thing that made me think of, and I'd had this thought before, was I always wondered why the Japanese had gotten into plastic models in such a huge way. I mean, there were dozens of Japanese model companies. Most, and they were not all for the export market. A lot of them strictly did for the Japanese market. And I've profiled a couple of them. They just gradually got in overseas stuff. But then I realized that after World War II, when Deming, Dr. Deming went to Japan and told them total quality management, and they decided we're going to have this industrial-based economy. Mm-hmm. Hundreds of plastics companies opened up because future sun is plastics, and it. I don't think this will sound least bit offensive. I think people will agree that the Japanese have always had a fascination with machinery and military equipment and robots and things like that. It's just it just sort of the two went together. Everybody started making this stuff. Well, a lot of the companies sold out, merged. Some stayed around, but some of these companies they just sought perfection. They really tried to make these magnificent models, and perhaps because of their lower labor costs, they were able to put an artisanship into it that was. Here, a lot of people, I think, just viewed it as an industrial process. I think for them, it was a little more of the mold makers were just more personally invested in what they were doing. Attention to detail is fantastic. Because some of the old Japanese kits, although by no means perfect, I've built a few of them, and I compare them to the American kits at the same time, and a lot of them were cut above.
It's an interesting point. It's a wonderful point. I'm glad you brought it up. And I mentioned in one of my videos how I was stationed in Japan for 2 years in the Air Force. And that was my first exposure to Hasegawa. Now, let me put this in a timeline. We're talking 1967. Mm-hmm. Okay. So this ground zero for Hasegawa. Yep. Mm-hmm. And as I said, for 65 cents at the base hobby shop, there was just a wall of Hasegawa kits. And I walked in there, I had never seen them. Being from New York, foreign kits or kits from other countries were from Europe. You had the French, Heller and Fowler and Frog and Airfix, and that was all that focus. And I'd never seen, and these kits were killer good. But you compare them to what came in the 80s, the Koike cover art. It was primitive by comparison, but on their own they were stunning. I mean, here I am, big Republic nut. And I built every F-105 kit ever done, but there was never an F-105D model until Hasegawa. Mm-hmm. And I must have built, oh my gosh, I lost count. It was nuts. Mm-hmm. I brought 2 of them home. They actually made it intact. They're on the shelf behind me over there. But this was what a breakthrough. I mean, you're right. The detail, fidelity, the attention to detail, the look of the model, as I said, how it really looked. It wasn't a representation of the airplane. It was the airplane in very small scale. And again, it was 1/72. And so it was a real breakthrough. But let me comment on the Japanese people and the culture. I was a pilot and I flew in the Aero Club over there. And on weekends, we would go to other air shows around the area. I was in northern Japan. So we'd go over to Lake Tawada and Amori and some of the great cities up in that area. And we'd go to these Japanese air shows. And I got to tell you, if you read Koku Fan magazine or Air Review, those folks took their aviation very seriously. Yes. And a moment of truth for me, I know we're both big Piper Cherokee guys, right? Mm-hmm. And the Honda Aero Club had a Honda aerobatic team of Cherokee 140s in formation with smoke. What was the James? It was a Goldfinger.
James Bond. It was
smoke canister.
Thunderball.
Yeah. Well, guess what? Guess where they put the smoke canister? And these 4 airplanes would come ripping down the fly line at 100 miles an hour, and the smoke coming back, and they would pull up together. It was just, it just brought tears to my eyes. It was so cool.
Before everybody lights up the keyboards, it was Goldfinger, Auric Goldfinger, where they had the Pussy Galore and all her. And I remember watching that as a kid because we had a Cherokee 140 at the airport. I'd flown it, and I was kind of like, man, I can't do that in our Cherokee.
Yeah, I hope they sure don't do that in my air. Oh my gosh, and now look what they did, But yeah, I mean, but just a little insight into, and everywhere we went, the people were so friendly and hospitable and just generally wonderful. We would take them up for rides. We'd go for rides in the airplanes, and it was just, and of course you look at the spotter, the guys hanging on the fence at Itazuki and Yokota and Kachikawa. And I mean, these guys were serious about their aviation, and I respected that greatly. It was a lot of fun.
You mentioned Keoki. I believe it's Keoki Shigeru, the artist for Hasegawa.
Yeo Koike.
Yeah, Koike. That's all right. I I have terrible time with, but he's like the second or third artist I profiled because I was getting requests for him. A lot of people had said, and I mean, I'd seen the Hasegawa. I didn't realize one guy had done most of them. And as I started researching, look at his artwork, I was blown away.
Yeah, he was the Linwood of Japan in the, I guess, 80s and 90s. Yeah.
He even used some of the Linwood techniques, like up in your face, no wingtips. You know, put the P40 up close. Who cares about the round wingtips?
Crowding the box. Yeah.
I actually made that comment on his thing about when I saw the P40 coming at you. I was like, you know, tell me these don't remind you of the Jack Linwood. Linwood is Linwood-esque. And when I was a kid, we had a book laying around our house. It was the art of a British artist named Frank Wooten.
Oh gosh.
And and I always loved his artwork, but what really, for some reason, after I go with it, was the way he painted the sky. Almost always clouds there, and they had a certain look to them. And it got to the point that I would go outside at the airport and I'd look up and oh, that's a Wooten sky, because the clouds looked like the way he painted them. He had an ability to use the clouds to add that element of romance, and that brings me to the question I wanted to ask you. And we all like the Linwood, you know, crowd the box look and everything, but from the standpoint of romance, I've noticed a lot of artists use rain, lighting, but what do you think adds that element of romance to aviation in artwork? Like the airliners on the night ramps where there's like it's just rain, so there's reflection. To me, that's always.
That's a fabulous question. Thank you. Let me come in from this direction. There are a number of different answers I could give you. Let me come in from this direction. You're a pilot. I fly. Any of us who fly live in a world, have seen things that people who do not fly just haven't seen.
Yes.
A sunset from 30,000 feet, sunrise, weather patterns, cloud patterns, you name it. What was the ocean? What does it look like flying over the ocean with the little cotton puff cumulus clouds? 10,000 feet below you, looking down, you can still see the water. Those kinds of vistas and those kinds of feelings create, key word here, a mood. You feel an emotional mood when you look at those things. And the truly great artists who create what we used to call in school high art convey that mood in their paintings because they fly. Maybe not as pilots, but they have been up there. They have seen that. They have experienced it. You can't fake something like that. You can't just copy it out of trace a photo and copy it and stick a guy on a canvas. And the artist that comes to mind for me is R.G. Smith. He was one of my earliest influences. I was honored to meet him and work with him at Douglas. We became lifelong friends. He attributes his career to Frank Wooten. He was inspired by Wooten's work in World War II. But R.G. would paint the sky all by itself. He would create the clouds and the mood and the whatever it was. You didn't need the airplane. That was the cherry on top. That was the finishing touch. But he'd paint the sky and then insert the airplane into the scene, right? He wasn't painting like a cutout airplane with clouds around it. He would paint the entire background and then put the airplane in. And the smaller the airplane relative to the total canvas, the more evocative the painting. So we used to call it the lonely sky, or the lone, it was, think of a 30 by 40 canvas with a 10-inch long A4 Skyhawk all by itself, cruising, little wisp of exhaust. And you'd walk up to that painting and just go, oh, feel it. He would paint a Navy jet out over the ocean landing on a carrier. I actually experienced this once, and I'm not embarrassed to share this with you. I was walking the halls of Douglas, and he had a painting called Operation Wet Wing, which is an A3 Sky Warrior refueling an A4 Skyhawk. As it comes back to the carrier, it disengages its battle damage, the A4, right? And the A4 disengages the hose and traps right on the deck. I mean, they did that to bring airplanes back during Vietnam. And I'm walking down the hallway of the Navy part of the company there in Long Beach, the Navy rep. And there's this painting. I see the painting at the end of the hallway, and it's Operation Wet Wing. It's a 4 by 6 foot canvas with the A3, and an A4 attached to the hose. And in the background is the Forrestal. And you can see they're on approach, and this is like, this is the moment. And it's a wet, rainy, stormy sky, and the sea state's about a 3. It's a rough painting. And I walked up to that, and it was on masonite. So we're talking, it's a board with a bunch of gooey stuff on it, basically. I walked up to that painting, and I could smell salt water, and I was cold. It was damp. I mean, it was so real. And that comes from the ability to convey that mood. So it's kind of a long answer to your question. I'm sorry, but
No,
that's what it's all about. And then, so that's one end of the spectrum. And the other end is the model box top, where the airplane is the whole thing,
Mm-hmm.
and the background becomes just supportive. But to answer your question, how is that done? You create the mood first, the airplane is inserted into that, and the rest is magic if you're doing it correctly.
I do have to offer one thing, and I'm not trying to make myself sound superior in any way, because I am not. But some of the cheats you pointed out that Jack pulled, like where's the bottom of the airplane on the other side of the Swiss, and I was like, I actually as a kid going, where's the bottom of the airplane? but now, mind you, I'm the kind of kid that would sit there and stare at every detail of the box art. To the point where those guys like, you gonna buy that kid or make love to it? No, he didn't.
We close at 5,
Yeah, but I remember looking a couple of times, going, I see a tail, and they weren't necessarily just jacks, but it was a technique of cheats you were talking about. Like, but where's the rest of the airplane, Dad? Where's the rest of it? It's just art, son. Like,
guess what?
Right.
Mission accomplished. That's exactly what you were supposed. I think I shared with you. I asked Jack about that. I said, where's the B-58 Hustler? Where's the ladder that the pilot is standing on getting in the cockpit? There's nothing there. The SS Hawaiian pilot leaving Hawaii. There's an island with a cockatoo up in the tree or something. There's no island. What is that? The deal was it made you look at it.
Yep.
And the next step was you had it in your hand, and the next step is you're paying 98 cents plus tax at the counter, and you're walking out the door with that model. And Jack said this. He says, I did that because I wanted you to look at it and buy the kit. That was my job. And I just, I wanted to hug him. I thought that was the coolest thing in the world,
Okay, one last question, and I'll let you go and finish off with anything you want to talk about. Now, I took creative drawing in college. It was an elective. I've always been a doodler, not an artist by any means. I mean, I have somewhere around here, I just got, Tom Daniel sent me his book, about drawing cars the old school way, and he shows and how much effort it takes just to make a circle. I mean, a correct circle. So I do have one piece of art hanging on my wall that I drew, which I will not share with everybody. Don't worry, I won't make you look at it. But it's my art teacher said one thing, and I have to get this opinion from you. And
sure.
It's fine to disagree. She said, there's no cheating in art, whatever it takes to get your picture on there. So she didn't care if you traced it or used an opaque projector or something to outline it. She didn't care how you got your art to look right, as long as it got to look right. And I don't know if that was just her opinion or if that's kind of the general attitude in the art world, that there's no cheating when it comes to painting or drawing, as long as you get what you want.
It's a good question, and I'm going to try and give you as honest an answer as I can possibly convey. There are many different ways of doing that. And there are schools of art. I worked for many years with Keith Ferris, who was kind of the godfather of the modern age of aviation. He was the founding member of the ASAA. He's the one that did the B-17 mural in the Smithsonian.
I've seen that. Thunderbird.
It's just the chapel of aviation art. I mean,
yep.
And he uses a system called the descriptive geometry, where you construct an airplane you take a 3-view drawing and you translate points in space, and you reconstruct the airplane, and you can make it in any shape or direction or whatever you want to do. All right, that's exhibit A. You put that over here. And then you have the guys who will trace a photo and flop it so you can't really recognize it, tweak a few things. That's exhibit B. My system, I build a model. What a concept. I build a 3-dimensional representation of the airplane. I put it on a stand. I take a camera. I walk around. I pick the view. I call it the money shot. And there has never been, I've done more than 300 major works in my career, and there's never been one where I'd walk around the model and not experience the moment where it's like, there it is. There's my painting. Okay. That's number 3. And there are variations. There are so many different ways of doing it. So to be fair, I'm not going to sit here and say, well, any one of them is better, but I want to take the quote that your teacher shared with you, cheating in art. Let's go back to Jack Lenwood. And he told me, he said, look, you're creating something. and you measure it out in perspective, and you plot the thing and the azimuth and the perigee, and the, it's all perfect, but it doesn't look right. It's not right. Do whatever you need to do to make it look right. You want to stretch the wing a little bit, do this, tweak this, blah, blah, blah. And that was his method. And that's what you look at any cover and you see engines that are tilted slightly or tails that are, the Aurora X15, he took the tail and tilted it over so you could read the word NASA on the back easier, that kind of thing. So you do whatever you have to do. What I'm trying to do is, pun intended, paint a picture for you of all the different methodologies that the artists employ to get the job done. And I guess it goes down to what the final result is. Is the painting going to hang in a museum? Is it going to be in a gallery? Is it going to be a mural in the lobby of an office building? Or is it going to be a model box top? They all require different things. So your art teacher was it was an interpretation. It's one of many different ways of answering the question. But the word cheating in art is relative. You always, the bottom line, no matter, I don't care if it's a, racehorse, ballet dancer, whatever it is, it has to look right and it has to evoke that mood that we just talked about, and then you've created good art.
Okay. Well, I think we've beat the viewers up pretty good today. Is there anything you'd like to add or say before we bid them farewell for the day?
Well, I'll just say thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a delight to meet you through the digital world, and I look forward to friendship and lots of good discussions. And as I said, I've been a big fan of your work, and so thank you so much for this opportunity. I really, really appreciate it.
Well, that's my pleasure. And folks, thanks for watching. I'm going to hit the stop button here. Just you and I'll stay connected for a minute. So, but I'll just say goodbye to everybody. Thanks for watching. Hope you had a good time. And we will see you guys. This will be tonight's show. I'm not going to do an after hours one. This will kind of be it. And
you have a phone call.
On that note, I will hit the button. Hit the button, Max.